Hello and welcome back. Part 30, here we are. So let's carry straight on, and I'm going to talk more about, kind of hoax theories and, where they come from and why I'm very against them. And I just want to reiterate just a little bit, again, that I'm not here to sell ghost stories and demon stories and poltergeists and things like that for the sheer sake of it. I'm just really not, because as I've said before, I am a grounded and even skeptical believer in these things. I do sift through the absolute nonsense and filter it all out, to say, well, you know what, that's absolute, piffle, really. That sounds ridiculous. But this, however, is plausible and defies logic. So, let's just look at it fairly and objectively. And I do feel that this is what is lacked here a lot, particularly those on the side of the hoax, is it does lack fairness and open views. And it can be, quite narrow-minded. And the reason I say, I'm not trying to sell it, because it's not my story to sell anyway. I'm just here to, kind of, encourage this, sort of different way, different approach, as I keep saying. So it's really, me trying to say, well, just because some people say something doesn't mean it's 100% true. And so, just going back to William Webber, just briefly now, I mean, let's consider the amount of people who do still say, and I still come across it all the time, saying it was definitely a hoax because the Lutz's lawyer said it was. He said that it was all cooked up over a load of wine. Well, straight away they're getting a fact wrong there, because he was not their lawyer. He was Ronald DeFeo, Butch. It was his lawyer, who they went to later to hopefully gain some information. So straight away they're getting it wrong about their lawyer being involved and then, coming out with it, but then it does contradict what a lot of people tend to say and believe when it comes to lawyers, because there's that old joke, isn't there? How do you know a lawyer is lying? And the answer is, well, their lips are moving. Yeah, so, a lot of people tend to go along with that, but then when it comes to this and what's suiting what they're trying to say, it's like, oh, but the lawyer said. Yeah, it's like, well, I'll believe what a lawyer said a lot sooner than I'll believe what they said. So it's all very sort of selective, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say there. Yeah, and I mean the thing that we've got to consider, I mean, I'm not sort of wishing to tarnish all lawyers and solicitors, and barristers, etc. But we are talking professionals who are paid, a hell of a lot of money to get criminals off the hook. That is what they do. I mean, we can, have someone who is guilty of something really, really bad, but you've got someone who's still really, really fighting to get them off the hook and to try and prove their innocence. Even if they know this person is guilty, they're still doing everything they can to get them off the hook, whether, it be right or wrong, sometimes, well, a lot of the time it be quite wrong. And so, suddenly people are saying, yes, well, you've got to trust what a lawyer says. Yeah, I think you see where I'm coming from there. Yeah. So let's just take that on board. That's something that I do feel is very worth, thinking about. Now, the book, the Jay Anson book, as we've said a few times now, it's been pretty much proven to contain flaws, inaccuracies, and certainly, exaggerations where Jay Anson used creative license and took some liberties, in turning something that started off as real claims into this horror masterpiece that ended up not really being a true story as such. Yeah, we've got that there, Now, people will sometimes say, and I do appreciate what they're saying, is, well, why didn't George and Kathy Lutz tell the world then that, what, that book isn't entirely accurate, that's not really what happened as such, some things happened, here, there, and everywhere, we were scared, but it wasn't like what you read in that book, and there are things in the book that just weren't true, why didn't they just open up to the world and just say that? Well, the thing is we've got to remember is they would have signed contracts to, have this book put out there. and would have maybe even signed over the rights to and allowed Jay Anson to work with it as he chose to. So what we'd end up with there is, they'd be damned if they, just turned around and said, actually, public, that story you've read in the book isn't entirely true. It's like, oh, so you're liars then. Then, on the other hand, by going along with it and keeping their mouths shut, they're deemed liars when the flaws, exaggerations, embellishments, etc., when all of that starts getting brought to the surface and picked to pieces, they're deemed liars because of that. Yeah, so, and then, having signed contracts, they could have got into a lot of trouble for breaking that contract and, kind of telling the world, well, yeah, that went out as a true story, but it wasn't exactly a true story what you read. That could have had big legal implications for them. And so this is what, some people don't tend to consider, that, things would have got complicated. And what I also think that, is important to remember is that they were a young couple at the time. I mean, George was 28, Kathy was 30. I mean, that's not very old, really, and there's every good chance that maybe, just maybe, they didn't understand what was going on. That they didn't understand how these book deals and the contracts and the legal agreements, etc., really worked. And so wouldn't really have been aware of how it would have, kind of impacted them in time to come. To know that this was going to create such controversy, by, kind of just going along with, well, that's not really the story as such, but yeah, carry on. I mean, how could they really have known that? I mean, it's just something that begs so many questions, as to, why they didn't, kind of make a big announcement. I mean, over the years, they kind of, did lean towards saying, what you read in the book wasn't exactly what happened, but we were genuinely scared. We were really frightened, But I mean, at the time, you're looking at something that was, set to be selling, and hopefully selling, and they could have, caused a lot of trouble, not just for themselves, but for other people involved by piping up and saying, what, these people have got it wrong. No, so I mean, they could have been, legally bound to keep their mouths shut and go along with it. These are just the things we need to consider here, rather than saying, well, if they knew it was all exaggerated, then why did they allow it to happen? I mean, like I say, there's so many reasons why that could have happened. That there's so many, kind of different, we could say, sort of, twists and turns, pitfalls, loopholes, whatever, as to why, they didn't sort of work against it and say, well, that's the story you've been told, now let's tell our story, because it could have gone against them, and it could have, sort of, caused even further controversy. I mean, there was enough controversy around it as it was. I mean, it's something that, I mean, really nobody could have predicted anyway. I mean, they had no way of knowing how well that book was going to sell. For all they knew, it might have sold a few copies and everyone forgot about it 6 months later. I don't feel anyone could have possibly predicted that a story would have fascinated the whole world and still be, discussed and talked about and causing arguments nearly 50 years later. I don't feel anyone could have possibly predicted that. And so this is what we got to think about. I mean, for all they know, they thought, well, yeah, it's not exactly a true story, but perhaps people read it and then forget about it by this time next year, and that's it. Not thinking, well, you know what, 47, 48 years down the line, it's still going to be fascinating, loads of people and new generations. That is not how people tend to think. Yeah, so again, just different ways to look at it. Let's consider it. Yeah, let's just give it a bit of time. Okay, back soon. Thank you. Many blessings.